We put the freezers in the produce section next to the bananas. We monitored the sales. We saw a 200 sales lift. Our youngest son, he was born with asthma and he couldn't have dairy. So because he couldn't have dairy, he was growing up, he wanted to have ice cream. He'd see his friends having ice cream at birthday parties. We applied for 3 years to Dragon's Den, and they said no to us. Once you get into a store, you're competing with everybody, regardless of their size. It becomes almost like a level playing
Thanks
field.
a lot for coming on the Shop to Scale podcast, man. It's great to have you here.
It's my pleasure, Devesh. Thank you for having me.
Definitely. So to start off, I mean, I've tried Nanopops myself. Me and my fiance tried this a couple of days back, and loved it. Like I can vouch for it personally. We're gonna talk about it for the next 40 minutes, but as someone as a user of the product, I can vouch for it personally. And we're always looking for like healthier treats, especially guilt-free indulgence, that says at the back. So you guys have an incredible product, first off.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that feedback, and also that you're supporting our local business.
Definitely. So Yazeed, maybe we'll start off just a quick intro about what Nanopops is, just for someone that's not familiar with the brand.
Yeah, absolutely. So Nanopops is one of our product lines. Our company is NanaShake. NanaShake was established just over 11 years ago. And really the way it started was it was out of a personal need. So our youngest son, he was born with asthma and he couldn't have dairy because dairy increases mucus production, which, negatively affects his ability to breathe, and it was affecting his asthma. So because he couldn't have dairy, he was growing up, he wanted to have ice cream, he'd see his friends having ice cream at birthday parties or at the parks. And so we went looking for dairy alternatives. We realized that they weren't any better for him than the dairy varieties. Yeah, they didn't have milk, but they still had plenty of added sugar, which also, makes the asthma situation worse. So, we looked at it and we're like, well, look, there isn't anything on the shelf. Well, maybe we can make something at home for him. And so Tamara's my wife, and the co-founder, my partner in the business, she looked up some recipes off the internet, started making frozen banana, ice cream. It was called Nice Cream at the time, and he loved it. And when we saw how it, positively affected his lifestyle and well-being, he was able to eat an alternative to ice cream and satisfy that sweet tooth, but it was also good for him. We looked at each other and we said, well, what if this isn't just for us? What if there's other kids out there and families that are looking for healthier and nutritious alternatives to ice cream? And so that's when we decided to start NanaShake. Initially, it was a scoop surf shop on the corner of Shepherd and Young. The store did extremely well. We had customers visiting us from all over, driving from Oakville, from Hamilton, from Milton, to come in and try our plant-based frozen desserts. And then when COVID hit, that really affected our store, because with all the retail restrictions and closures, it was very challenging to operate. And we're an ice cream store in Toronto, so you're really only doing big business maybe 5 to 6 months of the year. And so at that point, we thought, what is a good solution to that? Do we just wait to see if the store comes back, or do we pivot? And we chose to pivot at the time into consumer packaged goods business. And then, that was about 5 years ago. Fast forward to today, Nanopops is listed at more than 1,300 stores nationally across Canada, and really has become a staple in so many people's homes across the country.
That's incredible. And the fact that you were able to make that pivot into CPG, after, it shows to the perseverance of you and Tamara as well, that you were able to work together and kind of figure a way out of it. I think a lot of people in that situation would have just given up, or just said, maybe we just go into a different industry completely, especially after you've gone through that with COVID and all.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I mean, for us, we immigrated to Canada in 2014, and, we decided to start our business. So we really invested everything we had in the business. And so because of that, we've always just thought about, well, how do we make this work? Because for us, there isn't a plan B, there isn't a backup. This is what we're working towards. And so I think that helped give us that commitment and dedication. and persistence and perseverance, knowing that, this was, the main source of income for us going forward as a family.
Definitely. And you see the interesting thing about, you're very vulnerable about the fact that what was V1 or version one of NanaShake is not the current version. And in fact, there was times when you had to go through multiple iterations, velocity wasn't as high. You kept iterating, kept iterating, kept iterating, and now you're seeing like all the success basically. So maybe walk us through how did you kind of get through those periods first off, and then B is how, like, I guess, how were you iterating throughout that process of, you know, constantly trying to improve the product, constantly trying to get that customer feedback per se?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. I think one thing that's unique about our journey is that we started out as a scoop surf shop. And when you have a store and customers are, walking into your store on a daily basis, it's almost like a live demo. You're getting instant feedback. If they don't like it, they're not going to wait until they get home and let you know. They're going to tell you right away if they don't like the product. And so we used that to our advantage. We listened to the customers, we'd ask for their feedback, and it was a great testing ground. Because if, the customers didn't like a flavor, then we could just basically stop making it. We didn't, it's a lot more complex when you're a consumer packaged good and you're listed on freezer shelves. You can't just pull products that easily. And so we use it to our advantage, listen to the customers, the flavors that did well, we kept on making them. The flavors that didn't, we dropped them, we tested with new ones. And so we used that knowledge base over the 5-6 years of the store to continuously improve the product. Now, when we pivoted into consumer packaged goods, there was another learning curve because, it's one thing for customers to come to your store and eat the product, but now you're on freezer shelves next to hundreds of other ice cream brands and options. And customers have an expectation to what an ice cream or a product that's on the or in the freezer shelf next to other ice creams need to taste like. And so when we got into the first few stores, the velocity wasn't really there. We were seeing that the product wasn't selling as quickly as we would like it to or the store would like it to. And so what we did is we took, building on our heritage from the storefront days, we started doing a lot of demos in the stores that we're listed in. Again, getting customer feedback on the spot, asking them what we could do to improve, what they liked about the product, what they didn't. And we continuously use that on a yearly basis to update the product. So Nanopops that are in stores right now are Nanopops 4.0. So it's the fourth iteration. We initially, when we went from the first to the second iteration, the main feedback from customers was that they wanted a creamier texture and they wanted more flavors. So that's what we did. We expanded our lineup. We had 2 SKUs initially. We went to 5, improved the recipe and formulation. And then for Nanopops 3.0, when we asked customers what we could do to improve on 2.0, they said, well, look, you have 3 bars, a lot of the times, there's 4 people that want to have it. So it's a challenge. Do we buy 2 boxes? So that was, one of the feedbacks that we got. And also they asked us to work on the texture again. Although we had improved it, they thought that it could, there was room for improvement. So we went back, updated the recipe to make it creamier, went from 3 bars to 4 bars like customers have asked. And then with this 4th iteration, the last batch of feedback we got from our customers was that they would like to see more nutrition in Nanopops. And so what we did was we bumped up our protein content. So you can find 7 grams of protein now in 2 of our SKUs. And with Nanopops 4.0, I feel like we've finally reached a point where customers, needs and expectations are being met, both on a product quality level, pricing level, and in terms of the flavor selection.
That's incredible. I mean, for anyone as an upcoming CPG founder, that's like, if we need a lesson in iteration, this is it. And I guess one of the really interesting things, Yazeed, about NanaShake's journey is that it's the first, if I'm not mistaken, the first ice cream brand to be also merchandised in the produce aisle. Maybe walk us through how you were able to convince, a buyer, a category manager to actually get into the produce aisle. I mean, that's not exactly where ice creams are found.
Yeah, it was a challenge. And this is one of the things, going to that point, about pivoting from a storefront to consumer packaged goods is in the store, the customer comes in and you have the chance to tell them the story behind the brand. But when when your product is merchandised on the shelf next to hundreds of other brands, your product has to be able to tell the story itself. And so that's why, the packaging is so important. But beyond that, what we found was, look, we're in the stores, we're in the freezer aisle next to all these other brands. How do we stand out? And that was always the challenge, is when a customer comes and sees a brand that they've been enjoying and buying for the past several years, it's very hard to get them to notice a new brand and give it a try. Demos helped, but we can't cover all the stores that we're in. And so we were thinking, what can we do to stand out? And, we've always pushed the fact that we're here to shake up the ice cream category. And so we thought, look, our product is made with bananas. Where's the last place you're expecting to see ice cream in a store? Probably the produce section, the healthiest section of a store. And we're like, well, look, our products are made with a base of bananas. Bananas are in produce. What if we were able to merchandise our products next to the bananas that they're made with? And so that was really where the thinking came from. And it's all about this founder hustle. How do I stand out? How do I drive more sales? How do I increase brand awareness? And so we started talking to the different retailers, and it was a very challenging discussion. I think initially also because there's a lot of limitations. Stores will run different areas or sections of the store differently. They'll have different managers, different policies. And so, it was initially hard to coordinate that. Well, how do we get a product out from the frozen aisle and into the produce section? And so we talked to several retailers about it over 2 years. And then Longos, at the time, one of our key retail partners, we were at a trade show and we saw them and we're like, listen, guys, we've got this great idea. I know it's a little bit out of the box, but I think it would do well for us. And the great thing about Longos is that they are willing to try new things. They're known for that. They're willing to try different ideas, different executions. And so we finally convinced them to give it a shot. We initially started with 3 locations. We put the freezers in the produce section next to the bananas. We monitored the sales. We saw a 200 sales lift.
Wow.
Over like a 6-week period. They were so happy with the results. They asked us to expand it to 6 stores. So we added 3 more stores. And, today we're very proud. What started as just an idea. So Longos has freezers in 6 of their stores. Healthy Planet actually has become one of the biggest supporters of this initiative, and we're so blessed and grateful for their partnership. They've got the freezers in 11 stores now. Sobeys has the freezers in about 3 stores, and then we've got also Nature's Emporium. They have it in about 2 or 3 stores. So I think all in all, we've got about 25 freezers at stores all across the GTA right now, which we're very, very proud of.
Amazing. And I'm guessing the goal is, of course, to scale that out and try to bring that into more and more stores per se.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's a challenge to coordinate getting the freezers into the produce section because some retailers just flat out said they couldn't do it because of their policies, having a clean floor policy and other parameters that they work within. But yes, we're always looking at ways to expand this program and help support retailers drive more sales at their stores, with this really innovative and unique merchandising solution, which again, we're very proud of it because no other ice cream brand has ever been able to do this. And I think it's just a great achievement, especially for a local Toronto-based startup.
Yeah, definitely. And it shows like there's some themes there that I'm getting, Yazeed. It's like there's innovation, there's iteration. Those are 2 big things that I think that you and Tamara are, we can learn a lot from that basically. And then on the opposite side, you have like maybe what keeps you up at night. Like what are some of the things that, let's say, it could be whether it's cash flow, whether it's food safety, it could be a bunch of different things that so I guess what are some of the things that you say actually kind of keep you up at night when it comes to running NanaShake?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you mentioned food safety there. That's definitely one of the things that keep me up at night. And I think, being an entrepreneur and having your own business is challenging as is. But if if your business is offering services or, products like clothing or accessories, if a customer doesn't have a good experience or doesn't like the product, they could always send it back to you. You can always give them a refund. But I think what a lot of people don't see is that food adds another layer of complexity to that, which is, it's not just about the customer being satisfied with the product and how it tastes. Because it's food, because they're ingesting it, it has to be safe. And initially, when you start out as a food manufacturer, when you're making small batches, it's much easier to manage the food safety. But as you scale up and now all of a sudden you're manufacturing hundreds of thousands and millions of units, it is very important to have a very robust and strong food safety system in place. And we're very proud of the fact that the manufacturing facility that we work with are GFSI certified, which is the highest level of food safety certification that you can achieve. But that is definitely something that keeps me and I think every other food founder up at night, is you want to make sure that the food that you're providing and offering to different members of the community across the country is safe, is of high quality, is going to nourish them, and that they're going to have a great experience with it. Something else that keeps me up at night, especially these days, as now we've gone into the heavy growth stage of the business, is keeping product on shelf. We get a lot of comments from customers, especially on social media. We went to the store, we couldn't find your product, that's out of stock. And so, growing is great. Getting into, going from like 20, 30 stores to 1,300 stores is an amazing milestone, but it carries with it challenges, making sure the merchandising is executed properly, that your product is on shelf when customers want to buy it. And so, I think those are two things really that that come to mind in that regard.
And let's say there's someone listening to this right now, they're going through a similar issue, with the merchandising piece, for example, where they're not able to, which is a good problem to have, but a problem to have regardless,
Yeah.
I guess, what would your advice be? Do you hire outside help to kind of come in and streamline operations? I guess, what would be like step 1, step 2, step 3 to kind of solve that issue per se?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's only one solution. It's to have boots on the ground. You have to have people walking the store. And I think initially when you're in a smaller number of stores, it's easier to manage that, which is what we used to do. We'd visit the store at least once a week. And you can do that when you're in, 30, 40 stores maybe. But, when you're in 1,300 stores and nationally across the country, in 7 provinces, that becomes a lot harder to manage. And so, yes, we do some of our own store visits. We work with so we have a broker. Our broker will also visit certain stores to check on merchandising in situations where we've had big gaps that we've need to fill. We've hired third parties to help us, do the store visits and make sure that we have products on shelf. So, initially you can manage it, but as you grow, this is something that every food founder needs to account for. You need to have boots on the ground, visiting the stores regularly. Because look, the reality is, these stores and the staff working in them are very busy. It's a very high intensity, high pressure environment to work in. They're always running around. They always have things to do. And so there's thousands of SKUs on shelves. And so as hard as everybody works to keep things running smoothly and keep your products on shelf, there will be gaps. And so the only way to cover these is to really develop a system for doing regular store checkups.
Yeah, definitely. Well, that's, as you mentioned, getting your broker to help out, outside help, like whatever you need to do to kind of make sure that at least you're covering a certain percentage. And another part of the innovation iteration piece is that, I was reading that like I think a frozen category manager at Empire told you that your velocities are incredible. They're matching like a global brand. Can you start making tubs?
Yeah.
That's the launch of Nanopops. And from what I understood, you shipped it in about 5 months, like from concept to
Yeah,
release.
it was, so last year we got, we graduated as part of the Sobeys local program, and we graduated into a national brand, 7 years later. And so we had our annual update with the category manager just to go over the sales and see how things are doing. And he, surprised us with the great news that, he said, look, you guys are doing great. Your velocities are on par with one of the largest ice cream brands globally. And, but you're in the novelty section. How about a pint? And so, we took that to heart. And Tamara, started working in the background. I didn't even know. In the background, she was secretly developing the formulation, the recipe, developing a scoopable version of Nanopops. And so a few months later, she surprised me. She's like, why don't you try this? And I tried it. It was like a white tub. It didn't have any branding on it. So I tried it. I was like, wow, this tastes amazing. And she goes, guess what? That's Nanopops in a pint. And so we presented it to the category manager. He loved it, and true to his word, we launched the pints about 3 months ago, and they're listed at more than 700 stores nationally across Canada. And I think the biggest thing with that, Devesh, I would say, yes, we turned around very quickly. And the reason for that is, these opportunities don't come very easily, especially when you're a startup trying to prove yourself in this space. And so it's critical that when a category manager sees your potential, is willing to support the brand, you have to capitalize on those opportunities. And even if you don't see how you can turn it around, initially, you know what, just say, look, we'll work as hard as we can on this, and we'll get it across to you. So this was really the thinking. It's an amazing opportunity. We can't let it pass by. How do we make it work? And when you put yourself in that situation, you set yourself up for success, and you'll have a much better chance of delivering.
100%, 100%. And then going a bit deeper into that, like with tubs, I guess, with the format of tubs, and let's say when you have, bars, I guess, what are some of the differences that, someone who's outside the industry or someone that's just starting off may not even notice? It could be on the unit economics, it could be on the marketing piece, it could be on shelf placement. Like, I guess, what are some of the differences that you've seen with these two lines or products?
So with the pints, I mean, when we initially pivoted into consumer packaged business, we went to the stores and we looked at what was out there, and pints is obviously it's the biggest set within the ice cream aisles. So we initially thought, well, do we do tubs? But the challenging thing with pints and tubs is that it's dominated by some very strong, global brands that have been doing this for a very long time, and they've built a very strong affinity with customers. And we also looked and we saw there were other local brands that entered supermarkets and stores with pints. And they really struggled to compete with the larger brands because, the larger brands have bigger promo budgets. They've got bigger trade spend abilities. And so it's hard to compete with that when you're a local business. And so what we decided to do, we looked at the novelty section. We said, well, look, novelty, there's a lot more innovation in novelties, as you notice. There's less loyalty and a better chance to grab a customer's attention and have them try our product. And so that's why we decided to go into novelties first. And we did that for 6 years. And we actually waited. We waited until we got that feedback that, look, we think you guys are ready for the pints. And so that's why, it encouraged us to take a chance and develop the pint version of Nanopops. And now that we're in, because we've, built that brand awareness, brand affinity, people have come to love and trust Nanopops. Now they're willing to give the pints a chance because we've built that, we've built that relationship with them.
Definitely. And that's, I guess, how you also, increase the lifetime value of a customer. Let's say I'm enjoying the bars. I'm going to go in for the pints. I'm already looking forward to going for the pints, if it's at the Sobeys near me. But
no, and that's a good point. We actually, one of the things about the pints as well is, when we were doing demos for Nanopops, we would hear it from some customers. They were like, listen, this is great. Our kids love it. We have some of them too. When are you going to make something for us?
Yeah.
For the adults. So no, that's a great point, and you're right. You wanna make sure that you're developing that customer relationship and the journey. And our customers today who are kids having Nanopops, as they grow older and they want to get into pints, you also want to make sure that you've got something for them down the road as their tastes change. We want to make sure that we're able to satisfy all of those different preferences. And so, yeah, that's a great point. With pints, I think we've got a more robust product offering. We've got Nanopops for the young ones, and we've got pints for the parents or for people who prefer that format.
Definitely. So I guess, of course, increases the product line. I know when I was watching your Dragon's Den video, and it was great. I really enjoyed it. And congrats, you guys got 2 offers. That's amazing.
Thank you.
And I know you mentioned, there were a couple things you mentioned there. One was, I think, private label, and then also international expansion. So maybe starting off with the private label piece, I guess, where do you kind of see that as a bigger piece of, I guess, NanaShake overall?
Yeah, I mean, look, we're always looking at at the industry trends, where things are moving, and the insights for the past few years have shown that private label is the share of private label is continuing to increase, and more people are turning to private label. And a large part of that is because it's usually more economical than the other, when you go in with another brand. And so part of that is obviously because of the economic situation. People are under a lot of pressure with their spending, and so they're always looking for better value. When we saw that private labels share was increasing. We thought, well, look, I mean, if we're thinking long term as a business, we need to make sure that we're in line with these trends. And so that's why private label is important for us. We're doing well on the wholesale side, but as a business, continues to grow, and we need to keep an eye out on the future growth of the business. Private label is a great way to diversify our revenue lines, where we're not dependent on just wholesale. And so private label food service also is another one that we would like to get into. And so really, this is the motivation. It's because we want to think long term. We want to make sure that we've got a plan in place to continuously grow the business and not be dependent on a single revenue line. And then with international expansion, it's along the same lines. We've been able to achieve success with Nanopops here in Canada. We believe there is a gap in the market for this type of product, not just here in Canada, but across the border in the U.S. and globally as well, in other parts of the world, in Europe, in Asia, and in Africa. And so that's another great way to also continue growing the business and making sure that we are always entering new markets with our products. And so that would be the motivation for the international expansion. Having said that, it's you have to make sure that you execute it carefully. And so even though we do want to expand into other markets, we're being very intentional, very careful, planning for it, talking to other founders who have done it before, talking to other brands that have made that leap, learning from their mistakes, doing our best to avoid those big pitfalls. And so, yeah, I would say it's important. It's important to expand into other markets, into other revenue lines, but you also have to make sure that you plan carefully for it to set yourself up for success and give you a better chance of actually delivering on those objectives.
Definitely, especially in CPG, where like the margins are not. We're not talking about software margins here. Like the more you grow, the more cash is being injected. So a lot of times, I think, as you mentioned, like growth also needs to be managed in its own way, I guess. So if, for example, you grow too fast, but
Yeah,
we've seen brands that like have gone bust as a result of that. So
yeah.
that's a very important
Yeah,
criteria.
yeah, it's important. There's a lot of opportunities that we don't say yes to all the opportunities that we get, because at the end of the day, you have to make sure that you can support the opportunity and deliver on it. So that's a great point. You have to be very careful, very intentional with the growth, and don't bite off more than you can chew. And look, if you drive sales at the existing retailers you're in, and you keep on showing year to year increases, the other retailers, by virtue of that, are at some point going to take notice and going to ask you to bring your products into their stores. So our methodology has always been, well, where are you listed? Grow your sales where you are right now. Show those retailers that you can deliver incremental sales growth in that category year on year. That will, ensure that we stay on shelf. We develop very strong relationships with them, and then it spills into other opportunities, because once you're out there and you're registering on those sales, in the sales data, other retailers will take notice, and will be a lot more open to listing the product, and may actually approach you to ask you to bring the product into their stores.
Yeah, and an inbound lead is always better than a cold lead. So I mean, that's
Yeah,
definitely,
yeah,
definitely,
especially in this industry. Yes.
especially in this industry, 100%.
Yeah.
And so, you see, just one out of curiosity, I guess, for a founder that's looking at Dragon's Den as like one of the things that they want to do in the future. Maybe what's like one thing that I guess is maybe a misconception or something that like is not shown on camera, but something that is a misconception that people tend to have about Dragon's Den per se, because you've actually gone there and seen the behind the scene.
Yeah, I mean, look, One thing that people see the fact that we appeared on Dragon's Den. What they don't see is that we applied 4 times. The first 3 times, and every time you apply is a year, right? So they do it on an annual basis. So we applied for 3 years to Dragon's Den, and they said no to us. And then in the fourth year, they said yes to us, but we were still on the wait list, so it wasn't a guaranteed yes. And again, this goes back to that point. If you're presented with an opportunity, jump at it, because you never know when it's going to come again. When they told us we were on the wait list, we looked at each other, Tamara and I said, look, this is an amazing opportunity. Yes, it's not guaranteed, but let's go for it, and surely enough, they called us, and we went and we filmed, and we got the deals on the show. So that's one thing I would say is you have to be persistent. We all believe in our products. We all believe that our products are great, and that may very well be true. But what you need to keep in mind is that when you go and pitch for a show like Dragon's Den, they're not just looking for a great product. There's a lot of other parameters that they're looking for, right? So, for example, in our case, when we applied those 3 years and they said no to us, what we found out later is that, when they're going through the audition process, they only take a certain number of food brands, they take a certain number of services brands, because they want to show a full spectrum of entrepreneurship in Canada. It can't just all be in CPG. So, one of the reasons they said no to us might not be that the product is not good, but maybe they had reached their quota, or they already had enough CPG brands appearing on that season. And so that's one thing I would say is be persistent. If you get a no, it's hard. I know it's very hard. We've been there. It's hard not to take it personally, but really, the worst thing you can do is take it personally. Just take it as a redirection. Understand that, and this isn't just with Dragons Den. Even if you're working with stores and you're approaching category managers and they say no to your product, it's not always because your product is not good. A lot of the times as food founders, we're like, but why? But the product is great, and people love it. Well, the category managers have a lot of considerations to take into place that go beyond whether a product is good or not. And so just keep that in mind when you're dealing with counterparties. They've got their own set of requirements. They've got their own set of targets and goals to achieve. And so just be persistent. Be persistent. Don't take it personally, and come back the next year with a better story to tell. And eventually, if you've got a great story that continues on getting better and better with every year, at some point it'll be impossible to ignore it, and it'll be hard to say no to it.
100%. And you said a really key point that you said that they have their own targets and goals, the category manager.
Yeah.
So understanding and putting yourself in their shoe, and then figuring out where can their interests and my interests align together. I think that's something that you guys have done an incredible job at, as such. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very important. If you approach a category manager, with that attitude, and you treat it like a true partnership, and you ask yourself, well, how can this be win-win? The category manager at the end of the day needs to show sales growth in their category. And so what you need to do is you need to put yourself in their shoes. And so when you go pitch to them, demonstrate to them how your product can help drive that incremental sales growth. And if you can show them that your product can put them in a good position where they're achieving their goals, then all of a sudden the conversation changes. It becomes a much more fluid discussion. They're more engaged, they're more interested. But if you just show up and expect them to carry your product because it's got the greatest branding, and it's because it's got the greatest taste, and because it's got the best, ingredient deck, and it's clean label. Look, at the end of the day, those things are key, but they're not the only factors that are taken into consideration.
Definitely. That's great, Yazeed. And kind of pivoting from this, one of the final things I want to cover is, of course, the fact that you and your wife are running this together. I guess, how does that differ from normal, co-founder relationships? I guess, what are some of the advantages that you've seen? Because, of course, you guys are married and at the same time running a company together as well.
Yeah. I mean, again, with everything, it's got its advantages and it's got its challenges. It's challenging working with somebody who you are very close to, that you spend your entire day with. If you're spending your entire day with them at work and then spending your entire day with them at home as well, that can become challenging. I think everybody knows it can be challenging working with relatives or husbands, wives, partners. So that's in terms of the challenges. And what we've done to circumvent that is we've had to define clear roles within the organization. And I think that really helps, not stepping on each other's toes, knowing where my responsibilities start and where they end, and likewise with Tamara, and really dividing the tasks between us in the areas where we better complement each other. I have my strengths and weaknesses, so does Tamara. So I take on the tasks where my strengths are highlighted, and then things that I'm not so good at that Tamara might be good at, she'll take on for me. And so that, that's one thing that we've done is clearly define the roles. And another is, just, shifting from the challenges to the advantages of working with a husband or wife is, more times than not, you are on the same page. And I think that's always a challenge with having a co-founder is you might initially start out on the same page, but things change. And, 6 months down the line, you find yourself we're not on the same page anymore. And that's always a challenge. And I've seen that happens with a lot of founders. So I think one of the advantages of working with Tamara, as my wife and as my partner is that, our ultimate objective is to give our kids a better future. So it's hard not to be on the same page when that's concerned. And so because we've got that common objective, we find that more times than not, we are always on the same page. And that really helps that collaborative spirit between the co-founders.
Definitely, 100%. Yazeed, and this is great, Yazeed. Thanks a lot for incredible conversation. One question I always like to ask at the end is, if you had to go back in time, to like day one of building NanaShake, and give yourself one piece of advice where NanaShake would be double the size of it that it is right now, what would that piece of advice be?
You know what? I think honestly, if I go back, like I wouldn't want to double the size of the business because I think, one of the things that has really worked for us is that we've been very intentional, very methodical with our growth. We've only taken the opportunities that we thought that we can deliver on. And so, but if I go back and I think of, a piece of advice that I can give, to my future self is to not take things personally. It's really a challenge working in this industry as a small business. Once you get into a store, you're competing with everybody, regardless of their size. So it becomes almost like a level playing field. The only difference is those companies have much bigger resources, deeper pockets than you do. And so keeping that in mind, whenever we'd go and pitch the product to a store and we'd get a no, one of the things I think initially early on in our journey is that I would always take it personally because I felt that, this was us and we've put all of our work and effort into it. And if they say no to the product, then that means they're saying no to us. And, 11 years into it now, I can tell you that's not true. For us, it's hard to understand. But again, these decisions are not made simply on the merit of how good the product is. There's so many other variables. How many other brands have applied for this particular category review? What are the category trends? What are the sales targets for that specific category? There's so many things that go into it. And so I would just, tell my future self, don't take it personally. If you're not successful on the first attempt, come back a year later with a better story. If that doesn't work, come back the third year with a better story. Just keep on hitting at it, keep working at it. And you know what? A lot of those opportunities that we couldn't convert or capitalize on early on in our journey, now that we've demonstrated the product's success, those doors which were closed before have opened up for us. So in time, all these opportunities are accessible. You just need to be patient. I think that's one of the biggest things I would tell my future self. Be patient. Don't take things personally, and always come back the following year with a better story.
That was incredible. The last three things that you said, that be patient, always come back with a better story, and at the same time, which I'm forgetting is...
Don't take it personally.
Don't take it personally. Don't take it
Don't
personally.
take it personally.
Yeah.
It's a pitfall, and I see it, because look, we're people, right? We're people at the end of the day, and I see it like I see other founders at shows, and it's hard. It's hard not to take it personally when it's your product and you've put all your time and effort into it, but it is also counterproductive. It really is.
Of course, it's easier said than done, but it's that being able to control your emotions, or being able to understand what's going on in that moment and understand the bigger picture.
Yes.
Is crucial. And that's the reason why you guys have had success and consistent success throughout the years, and you're seeing that growth constantly.
Yeah. I look, I'll tell you, if there's one value that I hold very close, especially after doing this for 11 years, is hard work. Like nothing beats hard work. Getting up every day, and you know what? Some days you can show up at 100%. Some days you can only show up at 50%. You know what? There are days where you literally can just send an email or do a call, and that's fine. You don't have to show up at 100% every day, but show up every day as good and as strongly as you can, and just put in that hard work. You put in the hard work, eventually it will lead to results, and it will lead to success.
Definitely. And that's an incredible note. Dan Delphine, Yazeed, this was amazing. Thank you so much. Lastly, just tell the audience where they can find you and find NanaShake as well.
Yeah, you know what, guys, we'd love for you to, if you haven't tried Nanopops or our Nanotubs yet, we'd love for you to give them a try. You can find us at most of the major retailers nationally across Canada. For Nanopops, they're available at about 1,300 stores at all the major retail banners. And for our tubs, those are available at Sobeys, Foodland, Thrifty, and Safeway stores across Canada. There's about 700 stores or so. And all you have to do is visit our website. There's a store locator where you can plug in your postal code, and it'll show you which stores in your vicinity carry our products.
Amazing. And we'll link the store locator in the show notes as well, Yazeed. So again, thank you so much. This was amazing, and good luck to NanaShake and the continued success.
Thank you, Devesh, for having me. I had a great time doing this podcast, and I hope that we've shared some useful information that can help other founders on their journey, going forward.
Definitely.